YWCA. So today, right now, we're just kind of going to go around and introduce ourselves. I will start off and then pass on to Carrie. My name is Kat Hayes. I am the recovery specialist for the McLean County ROSC.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Knapp. I am a community outreach coordinator with the McLean County ROSC. Barb, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Barb Brumlevy, and I'm working on the Ford and Livingston County ROSCs and helping out in McLean County ROSC, which I'm very happy to do.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barb. All right, Stephanie, I'll go ahead and pop down to you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Stephanie Dembaski, and I work at Epiphany Catholic Church, and we're running a program with the ROSC.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. I see Selena on my screen right below Stephanie. Selena, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Selena Nolan, and I'm the new behavioral health specialist with the McLean County Health Department.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to have you on these meetings, Selena. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do Michelle and then Erica.
Michelle with the Bloomington Public Library. I do community outreach and I drive the bookmobile.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. Great to see you today.
Hi guys, I'm Erica. I work for Angi Youth Services under the State Opioid Response Grant, and I oversee McLean County as one of my counties.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erica. All right, we'll do Fran, and then we'll go ahead and shoot down to Jenna.
Hi, I'm Fran. I am the recovery support specialist for Sangamon County ROSC.
Awesome. Thank you, Fran. Wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Jenna Kearns. It's a camera off kind of day. And I work for the Illinois Bar Foundation with their Illinois Justice Court program, which is a volunteer program that helps people in the community navigate legal issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenna. It's a pleasure to have you on this call today. And then Natasha, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi there, I'm Natasha Nunu-Ponder. I work for the McLean County Center for Human Services. I work in the recovery program where we work with adults with chronic and severe mental health issues.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natasha. And last but not least, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Hannah, who is our wonderful guest presenter today. We are so excited to have Hannah on this phone call. She has been just an absolute pleasure to work with as we have made the ask of Hannah to create a all-inclusive awareness presentation for us. So Hannah has some really beneficial information to share with our council. Again, this meeting is being recorded, so please feel free to share our YouTube video after to anyone that maybe isn't here at the table today and that you think may benefit from some of this information. So Kat, we can go ahead and unscreen share our screen and then turn it over to Hannah to share her screen for today.
Hello, everyone. It's so good to see so many familiar faces, a few new faces as well. I'm Hannah Messouani, as was shared, with the YWCA, and I'm really excited to be here today hanging out with McLean County ROSC. I appreciate the invitation and hopefully have some good content to share with folks viewing. If I am a highly caffeinated individual, so if I'm talking too fast, tell me to slow it down. If I'm talking too much, mute me, you know what I mean? If you have any questions, please don't feel shy about just asking away, and we'll sort of get things started off. I do want to share that you are absolutely the experts in all that you do, as far as being the recovery specialist, as far as occupying the space and doing the work that you do with each other for the community as a whole. So my goal here is just to add a little, some language that you're probably familiar with, maybe some new ways to think about different language, because it is Words Matter Week. So I hope that I can do you all justice by offering a few little tidbits and some, what I like to call the do's and please don'ts, and more so than the never say this word again. Although there's some words we don't want to say. You'll see what I mean. So we're going to talk about why this matters. Today's focus is going to be on LGBTQ populations. We'll talk about that acronym. But I also want to address a couple other different demographics or different identities that folks get a little bit scared to talk about, or we worry about saying the wrong thing, or perhaps we don't know that we're saying the wrong thing. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to role model inclusion in different ways and leave some time for questions, which you're more than welcome to ask me right here, offsite, over coffee, etc., and so forth. So why does this matter? We know that it is Words Matter Week. We know that our words always have an impact. We know that we work with communities that have been through a lot in certain cases. And we know that using inappropriate language or using, even inadvertently, using language that is coded or veiled in some way is death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm sure we've heard of the term microaggression, right? So if I'm hanging out with Carrie, for example, and I keep calling her Kate, the first time, okay, fine. Second time, hey, Katie, Kate. Third time, why are you keep calling me this? She might just be like, get off this Zoom call. It's a consistent demonstration of me not respecting her enough or taking the time enough to respect her identity. You can imagine, Carrie, I know your name. We're here now. You can imagine that could be done on any number of levels with any different kinds of words, pronouns, etc., and so forth. So I want you to think about a time that maybe you've inadvertently used the wrong language, or somebody's used the wrong name, said a comment to you that didn't land quite right, and you felt immediately the kettle was boiling, right? And so a lot of the times for minoritized communities, whether it's people of color, whether it's people who are in recovery, whether it's LGBTQ folks, we're often painted as being hyper emotional or not in control of what we're doing or too reactive. But I want us to think about our words as little building blocks in the relationships that not only we have with the people we serve, but the building blocks of the community that that person that we serve is in, right? So are the building blocks supportive, or are they kind of crashing in on us, right? I'm a fan of metaphors, usually about food. We'll get there. But just to kind of think about each, not to put pressure on you about the words you use, but to see words as an opportunity to be invitational, to create bridges, and to create opportunities for connection. So why are we talking about this today, particularly around LGBTQ or queer identity? Is because it really matters. Oftentimes, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, we might think, okay, we're seeing more gay and lesbian folks on TV. You know what? People can come out. It's pretty safe. We're past it. Everything's fine. Actually, we've seen a lot of rights for queer folks, in particular transgender folks, being revoked. In 2021, there were over 150 anti-trans laws passed, or bills, proposed in the United States. You can see by this map that we are pretty lucky in Illinois for having full non-discrimination protections, but we are in the minority when it comes to the rest of the United States. So just to plant a seed of awareness for folks who may not be part of the LGBTQ community, that is scary out here sometimes, right? So just to be aware that we don't all have the same lived experiences, and maybe you do, and I welcome participation always, but we want to be aware of meeting folks where they're at, so to speak, with an awareness of what they might be going through or the considerations of things that are on their mind. I saw, as we were chatting and setting up for this presentation, a lot of similarities in the way that we talk about recovery and we talk about being gay or LGBTQ or bisexual, what have you. When it comes to the way that, whether it's the media, whether it's different religious institutions sometimes, or the people at them, I should say, whether it's public policy, there's this element of blame, right? So I'm sure we've heard the expression, hate the sin, not the sinner, right? Or the sort of blame of, oh, well, you shouldn't have been, in that area. Like, why were you out? Whether it's to a woman walking around or whether it's me holding my wife's hand, you should know that that's inappropriate. I'm sure you've seen infinitely more cases than I can imagine, or heard infinitely more stories about how addiction is often seen as a moral issue as well, right? A survey from the National Institute of Health just last year said that 76% of Americans think that substance use is a moral issue. Again, a moral issue that is assigned to the individual, not to the system, right? So whether we talk about, and again, you're all the experts, the overprescription of opioid drugs, whether we talk about the lack of sustainable healthcare for all populations in an equitable way, we could talk about, that broad picture, but the way it's lived day to day is it's always, oh, it's you. You didn't do the right thing. What happened to you? And when we think about compounding oppressions or compounding oh, you did the wrong thing. Well, for LGBTQ folks who may or may not be going through recovery or who have used substances, there's a double stigma going on there, right? And for minoritized communities or people who are persecuted for any of their different identities are at a higher risk for substance use, because there's just not systems out there that uplift and support in the same way that there are for majority populations. And this can be said for whether it's immigrants, whether it's people of color, whether it's LGBTQ folks. But I want us to think about when we attribute blame, when we hear the language of, oh, I failed, or oh, they're dirty. There's a lot that goes into it that chips away at a person's sense of self. And I'm sure you've been part of conversations with the folks that you serve and have heard a lot of that, like internalization of this blame. With the trans community, I mentioned all of the bills that were passed just 2 years ago, or proposed 2 years ago against them. 1 in 5, just over 1 in 5 trans folks in Illinois live in poverty. It's estimated that between 20 to 30% of LGBT youth use substances as compared to 9% of the heterosexual or straight population. So queer teens are literally twice as likely than their straight peers to use substances. And we could have an hour-long presentation or year-long presentation on why folks might turn to substance use, right? And there are infinite reasons. But I want to just suggest or just share that this is particularly true for this community for, again, the number of reasons that I've shared. And a lot of times when we think about the fantastic outreach work that you do, oftentimes, as I'll show in the next slide, we see a promotion of substances more often to minoritized, in this case, queer folks, than we see the promotion of substance recovery programs. So what I mean by that is really awful, actually. This was a lot, learning all this. Whew. So thinking about cigarettes, right? I lost my dad very recently to lung cancer. There was just a feeling that cropped up. We will nurture it. We will acknowledge it after this half hour is up. But the big tobacco, for example, specifically creates marketing programs, including one quite literally called Project Scum, talk about moral values and blame, to market cigarettes towards queer folks, in this case, to gay homeless men in the San Francisco and Sacramento areas, right? We think about DEI work, which is what I do, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. We think about the ways we want to market to a wide audience. Those who promote substances or who sell substances have a bigger budget than any of us to design horrible projects like Project Scum to sort of, get more consumers in, get more folks to use the substances, right? And we see this in particular lately with the use of poppers or amyl nitrates, and then other things such as alcohol and methamphetamines, in particular for gay men or bisexual men to assist in anal sex. So it's part of the culture. The same way that James Dean looked cool with a cigarette, queer culture a lot of the times, not all of the times, is very much like the bar scene. For example, here in McLean County, or specifically Bloomington Normal, we have a gay bar and it's great, love the bistro, but we don't have a community center for folks who might not indulge in alcohol, right? And so there's this sort of, in the same way that, queer folks, we love our iced coffees, we also have that is kind of like what it is to live a certain way, right? So whether it's cigarettes, whether it's poppers, again, which are very, very, very dangerous and also lead to higher risk of things like HIV, of assaults, all of these different kind of things we see that happen when folks are using different substances, right? And what does that lead to? Increased stigma, increased aversion to going to receive the healthcare that folks need and deserve. And so when I think about each of you and the work you do and the budgets that you have to sort of get your name out there and the services you do, if you're somebody who is queer, who is trying to stop using substances or just get help in some way, oftentimes those spaces don't look like they're welcoming, even though each of you are. In the preparation for this, we've had such wonderful conversations, and I would feel thrilled to send anyone I knew who was going through this to you. But that's often not how it's perceived outside. So it's kind of having to do a lot more of the work to build that trust, because it takes a lot to undo a lot of the branding and a lot of the stigma. And one of the first ways that we can try to create bridges is using the right language, right? So for example, I have my pronouns are she, her. As someone who is cis, it doesn't cost me anything to share that. So if you are able to, please do. If it's something you feel confident about, awesome, go for it. Sometimes you'll see different programs. I mean, everything from Nike to the Coffee Hound will have rainbow flags going on. You can do sort of more visual representations, kind of virtue signaling a little bit, but sort of saying, hey, I know you exist. I've thought about you. We as a team are equipped to have conversations. But even as individuals doing this work, I thought it would be helpful to do a little language review. So for folks here, can I get a show of a thumbs up, or what are our emojis? A thumbs up if you're like, I got this, LGBTQ language, psh, easy. Or maybe a clapping emoji if you're not 100% sure. So a thumbs up if you're like, girl, you can leave, I'll lead. And then a clapping emoji if you're like, maybe stay. I won't be offended if it's all thumbs ups. Okay, Natasha, you're in charge. Just kidding, I won't put you on the spot. Yes, Jenna. All right, so quick review. We know straight means somebody who is attracted to a different gender, often called the opposite gender. So I identify as a woman. Typically, if I was straight, I would be attracted to men. Cisgender is sort of the opposite of transgender. And so I was born, thank God, I was a little baby, came out as a baby. I was a really cute baby. Doctor saw me and was like, that's a girl. And I feel like I am a woman, to quote Shania Twain. So cis meaning the same. I pretty much identify with the gender that was assigned to me. It just means that you're not trans, right? Oftentimes you'll hear the word cis is like, ooh, why do we need an extra label? Because language tells us things, right? Gay and lesbian you'll hear a lot. It is strongly advised to not say homosexual, even honestly to say heterosexual, because of the medical history of the term sexual and the hypersexualizations of the word sexual, right? So we remember the early 2000s and the whole no homo joke. Don't do that. Don't do that, because for me, my life is very homo and I enjoy that. You know what I mean? But also like, that's so gay, all those jokes, we don't need to do that. So if somebody is gay or lesbian, they are attracted to people of the same gender. Say gay, say lesbian, you can say queer. Try not to do the thing that a lot of folks will do is, oh my God, I would have never known you were gay. Because then that implies again that there's one right way to be. And you can imagine for the folks you serve, like I would have never imagined, or like for each of you, I'd have never imagined you work in this field. You don't look like that, you know, it gets icky. I don't want to tell people to tell me what I look like, because Jenna, every day is an off-camera day for me too. So queer is a really good umbrella term. It captures the idea of what is asexuality and then what is gender as well, or sexual orientation, I should say. I identify as queer because I don't necessarily feel the need to tell everyone in the world that I am a bisexual cisgender woman. So queer is kind of the catch-all in the same way that I would say I'm a person of color instead of particularly telling you that I'm Arab. So it's kind of a catch-all. It's easier than saying LGBTQIA, all of the acronyms, alphabet soup, there's so many. But to share with you that the term queer, particularly for older generations, so I'm thinking of folks 60 and up, the term queer is most known as a slur. So not quite the F word if we're talking about the queer community, but kind of up there. But also it is the term that's used in like academic scholarship and theory. So queer can be a crunchy word, but I would ask you to say, are you comfortable with me using that word? So y'all know me now. I said I'm queer. You can say, hey, are you queer? That I'm down with that. But for other folks, particularly older generations, queer literally means odd, and it was used in sort of a pejorative sense. Okay, to be bisexual or pansexual, people who are attracted to folks of other genders. Gender is not necessarily a binary. There's not just man, woman, boy, girl. You can exist across a spectrum, and bisexuality includes that spectrum. There is an unfortunate history of hypersexualizing bisexual women. Honestly, the early 2000s were a really dark time. Does anyone remember the term barsexual? Oh, I'm so glad you never had to live through this, Barb. It was the idea that, oh, you're only bi at the bar for men's attention. Don't do that. Don't presume that if someone is bi, they're, you know, down.
I never heard that name of it, but I mean, I'm early 90s. I was out there. I didn't hear it, but I know what you're saying.
Right. You've heard, I'm sure, similar phrases of like, oh, how interesting that you're bi. Well, maybe you would like, no, I would not like to. In the same way that not every straight woman wants to be intimate with every man in the world.
Right.
Like, sure, we can think of at least one we're not about, right?
Yeah.
So there's unfortunately this history of hypersexualization of bisexual folks. Sorry, I taught you that awful phrase, Barb. But there's also a lot of erasure of bisexual folks. So even for me, when I came out, quote unquote, it was, oh, is it a phase? Are you really just waiting to come out as a lesbian? What have you? So it's both like under a spotlight and hidden behind a curtain. So if someone tells you that they're bisexual or pansexual, just, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. Is it okay to share this in other spaces or not? Not presuming anything. Don't make it about the sex, is what I'm saying. Asexual and aromantic. These two identities are often, up until recently, considered medical diagnoses, as was all of queerness. And they're still not really discussed even within the LGBTQ community. So to be asexual is to be someone with little to no sexual attraction to other people. You don't want to get physical, you never do. It's not erectile dysfunction. It's not being frigid. Nothing's wrong with your parts. Don't suggest to anyone, just try it. And then being aromantic is somebody who has just genuinely no interest, no inclination, no desire whatsoever to be in like a romantic partnership. So oftentimes different community building programs. So I'm not sure what each of your respective programs is like. It's about building community. Do you have a partner you can trust? Are you looking to settle down? And we might presume that for the people that we're helping out or the people that we're serving or just everyone around us, that the goal is to, have 2.5 kids and a partner of a different gender. We want to make sure that we're not presuming that in everything that we do, right? Because if we accidentally say, oh, Carrie, what's your husband's name? And maybe Carrie doesn't have a husband, but has a female partner. Carrie might be like, ooh, I don't want to have to make this a big deal. I don't want to have to come out to you in that. So not presuming is really a key thing. And then not presuming that any of these identities are a deficit. So transgender, as I said, is when you were born. What do doctors look at when you're born to tell your gender, or even before you're born? They look at the downstairs. They're like, okay, you got these parts, you're a boy, these parts, you're a girl. Gender is not that simple. So anyone who doesn't fit into that is transgender. Don't say transsexual. The same way we don't say homosexual. No. That's like a very 80s medicalized, lots of slurs came out of that word. Let's not do it. Gender dysphoria, or folks' journey towards gender affirmation, is hard. It requires a lot of, for those who proceed through to medically be gender affirmed, it involves a lot of time, a lot of therapy, a lot of doubt of the institution on them, a lot of medications, but also it's not for everyone who is trans. So don't ask folks about their bodies. Don't ask if it's not your trousers, it's not your business is generally a rule of thumb. Don't ask if they're going to have surgery. Don't ask if they're really a man when they knew. If it's not part of your course of support for them, don't ask, let them volunteer, right? In the same way, we wouldn't ask each other about the most intimate parts of our lives unless we had an established friendship. Don't do it for LGBTQ folks. And I know none of you would, but unfortunately, there's this sort of pattern, whether it's within healthcare, whether it's in any social work situation or life outside of it, that we think we are owed stories of folks who are different. Because, wow, I've never met anyone like you. Can you tell me what it's like? And sometimes we do it really well-meaning. I'll get it a lot about being from Morocco. Like, what is it really like there? And sure, so if we're having a cup of coffee, I'll tell you about it. Tangier is great. But if I'm coming to you because I'm struggling and I need help, I don't want to talk about, the bits and pieces or where I'm from. So just kind of a reminder that we don't want to turn our folks into our personal Googles. For gender nonconforming, these are folks who do not identify as entirely or exclusively male or female, and don't ask if it's a phase. The same thing with what you wouldn't do for bisexual folks. What percentage straight are you? What percentage gay? What percentage woman? I don't do math. And also, that's not how humans work. If I asked you what percent you loved your spouse, ooh, don't answer that. First of all, that's strange. So, so just kind of that thing that we're used to this sort of question in ways that we don't hear. A lot of times I'll hear questions about how do we use they, them. So one of my really good friends, non-binary, uses they, them pronouns. A lot of folks will say, but they is a plural pronoun. And I love me a bit of grammar. I could talk about gerundives all day. However, as early as Chaucer, we use they as a singular pronoun. For example, oh, someone left their phone. I hope they find it. And I use this example because when it comes to talking about groups that are different than us, we get really scared of messing up, right? We're very afraid of I'm going to say the wrong thing. Oh my God, I did the wrong pronoun. You will mess up. I mess up all the time. You apologize, you keep it moving. You make your apology sincere and you try to learn, but know that it is always better to apologize and not put a spotlight on the person, right? Like these things are a lot more simple than we think they are oftentimes because we're talking about a lot of taboos. And to be mindful of time, when it comes to things like addiction, gender, sexual orientation, politics, these are all the taboos of things that we are told never to talk about. I don't know about you, but at my dinner table, we were not talking about politics and race and sexual orientation, right? So we get really uncomfortable. I don't know if you have anyone in your family who's ever lived with addiction or who's ever been in recovery, and the other family members will give the look and, well, we can't talk about it. That adds to the element of shame. We see that with all of these different communities that I'm addressing and beyond, right? And so I wanted to give a shout out to Real Chance Month at the YW. So this is where we focus on supporting women who've experienced incarceration. And we call it real chance instead of second chance. And I'm sure you see a lot of this language in recovery, right? Folks are coming to you, they want help to have a chance at life. When we say, oh, we're going to give you a second chance, it implies that you messed up and there was blame the first time round. But when we're talking about populations, particularly Black communities or queer folks or immigrant communities, they've never been really given a real chance, right? So you can imagine if you were born somewhere, you're being racially profiled, you don't have access to school or family or the things that you need to be nurtured and loved. You never got a real chance. Why are we calling it second chance in a way that blames the individual for the, shortcomings of the system? A lot of times this kind of work, all the time, this kind of work that you do is so personal. So you may be asking really intimate questions, but for folks who've experienced incarceration, I've genuinely heard at fancy lunches, folks go, so what was rock bottom for you? And, you're trying to have a tapas and a little fancy crostini, and someone's like, tell me about the worst moment of your life. I don't answer when my therapist asked me. So why are we doing that, right? So knowing when and what is helpful. So for anyone that you're working with or you're serving who has experienced incarceration, here's a few things we want to do. We want to use person-first language. Now, words do matter. Using person-first language is not meant to be a cover that you can say something horrible about a person and then say, oh, they're on parole instead of saying parolee, right? We want our intentions to be good. That's why we're all here, right? So just some best/better practices. Instead of calling someone a criminal, a person who's experienced incarceration, or a person who is experiencing if they are still being held in prison. Instead of calling someone an inmate or a prisoner, you want to center their personhood and not the situation that they're in, right? So folks will feel differently about it in the disability community, for example. There's folks who prefer just call me disabled, and other folks who are like, I'm a person who's disabled. My disability doesn't define me. So with all of these, there's some wiggle room. I can't give you here's the sheet of paper and you will never go astray. But this is sort of how language is working at the moment and how we can be our most inclusive selves, right? So centering the person over the predicament or the situation that they're in. For the work that you do, again, y'all could teach me this so much better. But instead of calling it addiction, which I apologize, I caught myself earlier doing that. So apologizing and then learning, we call it dependency or use, right? Because people have been put into a situation where they become dependent on this thing because independence hasn't been granted in other ways. Instead of saying, oh, have you kicked your habit? It's a disorder. It's something that deserves to be cared for, right? In the same way that we care for folks who might be hurting in other ways, right? So sort of take away the blame aspect of you deserve this, you're doing it to yourself, to what are the community support systems? Well, it's ROSC, right? It's all of us here. Instead of calling someone reformed, which again has the implication of they were doing something real bad and they needed to be reformed. We've heard of reform school. Say they're in recovery, because recovery, like coming out, right, isn't a one and done. It's ongoing. And recovery is a far more hopeful term that is focused on the beautiful things than is saying reformed. Don't ask if somebody had a clean or dirty test. Don't call someone clean or dirty. Are they actively using? Do they test positive or negative, right? Which, interestingly enough, testing positive is what one would call dirty, but again, more positive language, right? Instead of attributing these moralistic views onto people. There are so many euphemisms out there for every community that I have mentioned, right? So I could talk about undocumented immigrants, right? Not illegal, undocumented. There's so many jokes we make about that community or about the queer community or, folks who are in recovery. Have you fallen off the wagon? The history of a lot of these sayings is so problematic. I learned not too long ago that the phrase to call a spade is deeply racist in origin. I encourage you to look it up. Randomly, there's so many horrible histories to the language and the idioms that we use. Falling off the wagon is an easy one to catch. Just, are they actively using? Are they using again? And then unfortunately, we ascribe this language to even to babies who have not yet been born, calling them addicted instead of saying that they were exposed in utero or they've been exposed in other ways, right? So especially when it comes to babies. So address the mistakes. Again, I messed up and I used the word addiction instead of saying substance use earlier. Fully own that and give space for correction. So if, for example, Carrie, I'm picking on you a lot today, you'd been like, hey, don't use that word. Awesome. Thank you. You've taught me. I now know, and it lives on the internet forever. I love when my mess ups do, genuinely. If I've harmed someone, even in this presentation, reach out to me. If you want to have a conversation, we can. But again, like if I've said something to you, whether I am trying to support you or whether it's in this presentation, I should know that it is expected that I apologize and encourage that I learn, right? So for folks who've been in situations like this and you're not sure, okay, did I do the outreach correctly? Did I say this word? Did I call someone homosexual instead of asking if they were gay? You apologize. That's the expectation. You step on someone's foot, even if you didn't mean to, you apologize. That is kind of just like the bare minimum requirement, especially when we're working with people who are vulnerable, who are coming to us for support because the power dynamics are there. And then the learning piece is encouraged. It's what y'all are doing right now. Don't be afraid to correct others kindly, but firmly. So if you're in a session and, it's a group counseling situation, whether it's a peer counselor, whether it's someone in the group who says something wrong, you don't want to be like, hey, Barb, what are you doing, Barb? What is this? No, you could say, oh, I think what Barb meant was this, or after the fact, you could take her aside and have that conversation, because we all have a lot to learn and unlearn in particular, especially around identities where we ascribe moral value, right? Because growing up, how many times have we been told, whether it's by parents or loved ones, oh, they're from the wrong side of the tracks, they're from that part of town, we want to have a good life. Oh, it's that community, those people. We sort of have this binary way of thinking in so many ways. And I learned this about myself every day too, like, wow, where did I absorb that classist thought? I have to like unpack that, right? And so that's why I genuinely love when my mistakes live forever, because it's a reminder for me that I'm still unlearning too, right? And so respecting boundaries. So again, if you're in a group setting and someone has come out to you prior, or someone has shared that maybe they're struggling with a custody battle, in the same way that you wouldn't blow up their spot about being in a custody battle, you wouldn't be like, oh, you can speak for everyone queer, right? And like, I know y'all wouldn't do this, but sometimes, and honestly, I catch myself doing it too. Are you ever sitting in a room and you're the only person of a certain identity? Maybe you're the only woman in a room and all the guys are like, oh yeah, Women's History Month is coming up. What do you think we should do? And then they all look at you. I see some head nods and you're like, gosh, maybe you should try something, right? So we do it inadvertently, even if we're not necessarily saying, Carrie, you're a woman, right? Can you? No. We do it with our eyes too. And I have to like deliberately in presentations, especially in real life, be like, don't look at the one person who said something, because then all that does is put a spotlight and more emotional labor on that person that we're supposed to be helping. So respecting boundaries, asking permission before you out about whatever it is, and then holding yourself accountable and then holding your team accountable too. In the same way that we hold those we serve accountable to their goals, we want to make sure that we're doing that for ourselves too. So I would like to thank you all, and thank you, McLean County ROSC, for having me. I will stop sharing and I'm around for questions if you got any.
We can leave the floor open for questions for the next like 10-ish minutes if anybody has any.
Also, please feel free to type them in the chat and I can read them anonymously if folks are a little uncomfortable asking.
I guess I just wanted to make a comment. Like, first, I always love any of your presentations, so I'll just fangirl a little bit. But also, I guess I appreciated the confirmation about some language, because I had been hearing more more use of the word queer, and wanted to make sure, because I knew of the history and was like, that's still got to be a word that is kind of, like maybe a case-by-case basis. So I mean, I think you confirmed that, but still acknowledge that I do see it more often as like a way to not fumble over all of the acronyms and letters and things like that. So maybe it's anyway, I liked that was something that I learned today, or kind of confirmed something that I was thinking.
I think I see a question in the chat, Hannah. Can you speak to the usage of Ella?
Yes, absolutely. And just to shamelessly fangirl over Jenna as well, this ties into the use of Ella or Ella. The LGBTQ community, we are creating more language, sort of like honestly, I feel like I blink and there's a new word, and it's wonderfully affirming because there's been a lack of opportunity to express ourselves safely. You saw the map, right? Like, it is not safe for me to be married to my wife in every space that I go into, right? And that is a horrible, terrifying reality about the best part of my life, right? To share the use of, when you see someone's pronouns like she, her, and then ella, they're indicating Spanish, right? So speaking Spanish and using the she pronoun. So I, for example, don't have it there because I speak Spanish like a first grader. I speak French, so I could have done elle, but the chances that you were going to be like, bonjour, comment ça va, were pretty slow, you know, right here in McLean County. So I don't really include it. I could throw in the Arabic, but usually ella is to signal that their pronoun use, but then also for folks who might be predominantly Spanish speaking. So it's a wonderful thing to have there if it is in your signature, if you are comfortable sharing gender, but know that it will be presumed you speak Spanish. And if you do, let's hang out. I've been trying to learn on Duolingo for so long. But I will put in the chat too a newer pronoun along with they and them. Or actually, let me ask you, what pronouns come to mind when you think of non-gendered pronouns?
I'm familiar with they, them. I've also heard zir.
Yes. So I'm putting in the chat. I don't know if this will show up on the old YouTube, but there's fae and fair. So it's spelled F-A-E, like a fairy, if you will, sort of that term, not to indicate the negative use of the word fairy there, a and air as well, or z and zer. It can seem scary. You're like, I've not seen these letters in that combination. Like, is this a Scrabble word? What is going on? It is okay to have a natural fear of misusing these things. But in the same way of like he and his, or they and their, fae, they, fair, their, z, they, or he, she, zir, there, right? So we're using different words to signify non-gendered pronouns. A lot of them will come in and out of usage because folks will find a word that fits best. Unfortunately, a lot of times there are negative attitudes about folks who use z or a or fae, and it'll be like, oh, is that just for an attention grab? Like, why are things so complicated? And we hear a lot of that language. I love the look of discomfort on everyone's face that I could see, right? Because we hear the same thing about, why do women need a history month? So why do black people need a Black History Month? Well, we can talk. So allowing folks their names. And speaking of that, for folks who do work with individuals who are non-binary or transgender, if someone tells you their name is, for me, my name is Hannah. If my legal name was something else, maybe you have to write that down on a piece of paperwork for reporting, or if I required hospitalization or something like that. But if I tell you my name is Hannah, please call me Hannah. Don't call me by my other legal name, especially if I'm transgender. So if I was born and the doc and my parents said I was a little boy and I had a boy's name as my legal name, there can be the temptation to be like, oh, but it's their name. And like, I have all these systems of reporting. I just need to call them. No. Let's not do that, because it's a really aggressive version of the Kate versus Carrie comparison earlier, right? And same thing with pronouns. A lot of times, and again, I don't anticipate it from this group, folks will be like, well, why do I got to remember all this? And the thing I say is, you wouldn't want someone calling your wife honey if, you know what I mean? Like, that's not your place to use that word. Or in the same way that I know Kat's name, that's Kat, right? Is it important to know why someone would pick those certain pronouns? I think you can ask if you have a relationship with them about that. It's typically a desire to break away from the gender binary. So the he, she, like to separate from that and to have gender that exists outside of that. I would say you don't have to know in order to use them, right? And so we talk about equity as being, we always want to like change hearts and minds to create more inclusive spaces, but I think it's a lot about the behavior. So just using those pronouns if you have a relationship. If you'd like to connect offline about the sort of increase in or variation in different pronouns, I'd be happy to, but I think mostly knowing the right pronouns to use and the spaces in which you can use them is the more important takeaway. But that's a really good question, Steph. My face is so big. Any other questions?
Thank you so much for your time today, Hannah. You did an absolutely incredible job, as I knew that you would. So thank you for all of your expertise. I learned so much new information from your presentation, and I'm hoping that it'll be beneficial as we move forward with each of our different duties and the different people that we interact with each and every day. So thank you for your expertise and your time.
And if people are interested in connecting with Hannah further, we'll include her contact info in our meeting notes too. So just to go ahead and wrap up our time for today, just doing a quick couple of updates on our Sober Social events we've got going. We have a bowling night at ISU at the Bowling and Billiards Center, April 21st, from 6 to 9 p.m. There will be more info on that in the meeting minutes if you want to sign up for doing that. Along with, we've got coming between the end of April and through May, we've got free Tai Chi classes we will be offering. Those will be led by a certified instructor. If you're not able to attend the Tai Chi classes, you can also check out our YouTube channel for some upcoming Tai Chi lessons. And then through the month of April, we're working on collecting professional clothing from people in the community. The clothing we're going to be collecting is going to benefit people in recovery, along with people who may not be able to afford nice clothing, whether it's for court appearances or, it's first job interview and they can't afford, a nice pair of pants and maybe a blouse. So we'll be collecting those through April and we'll be distributing those later. And then want to open the floor real quick just for some agency updates. Are there any new programs, new events, new resources, any questions for the team?
Yeah, I have just a quick little message to throw out there. April 22nd is Drug Take Back Day. In my grant, Omni Youth Services tries to do as much work as we can with all of our counties. So I'm looking to get our safe disposal one-pagers, get Deterra pouches sent out to anyone who needs them. We also have community one-pagers and adolescent one-pagers. So I have a lot of resources that I'm so ready to send to anyone in the area who needs them. So I'll throw my email in the chat if anyone wants to connect. But yeah, if anyone needs anything for Drug Take Back Day, please reach out.
Okay, I'll connect with you offline on that, Erica,
Okay.
because some of that information we could also share on our social media and also our virtual resource guide.
Oh, cool. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So I'll connect with you after. Any other updates people might have?
Hey, Erica, quick question for you. Do you know which sites throughout McLean County will be a collection site for Drug Take Back Day?
I do not. I'm in the process of trying to figure that out. So I reached out to the health department and then I've reached out to 2 or 3 of the police stations, but I haven't heard back. So I'm hoping to hear back. And if I do, I can definitely try to share that.
Okay, that would be awesome. And we would be happy to share that on our social media for you as well.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find and send that your way.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, I will go ahead and make a quick plug real quick since we've got one of our community partners on the line. More information to come once we post the flyer on Facebook, but we are working with a alternative pathway to spiritual wellness called Alpha. And we're partnering actually with Stephanie and somebody who, or one of our presenters at our holiday party we had last December. Stephanie, do you want to do just kind of a quick 1 or 2 sentence overview of what Alpha is?
Yeah, we'll see if I can keep it to 1 or 2 sentences. Alpha is a program that introduces, it kind of starts off, it's an 11-week program where people come to a video once a week. They have conversations, small group. We feed them. It's all free. And it kind of gives people purpose in life. And it does eventually lead to like offering them the chance to explore Jesus as a pathway to like their wholeness in their life. It has a lot of people. The videos come out of a church. It's called Holy Trinity Brompton. It's a Protestant church in London. And they have been in prison ministry for more than a decade. They use it all across the world. It's been translated into most languages. And so there's a lot of people in the video who've had substance abuse, who've had mental illness, who've been in prison, and they have encountered Alpha, and it has helped them on their pathway to recovery for the rest of their life. So we are really excited. I work with Epiphany Catholic Church, and we've been running this program in our parish for 5 or 6 years now, minus COVID. And then we are really excited to run it with the ROSC and hope that it can help people on their path to recovery.
Stephanie, can you share some more information on where that's going to be held at and the dates and times, and if registration is required?
Registration would be great to sign up, just so we know if we have to feed you, right? If you have food issues, we do offer free childcare because we know that can be a standing point if you are anywhere between birthing ages and have children. And so we don't want that to be a restriction on people coming. So the program's free. We feed the adults. We watch the kids. And this spring, it's going to start April 12th and run through, I think it's June 14th. It'll be, is it 14th? I don't.
Might be June 21st.
It's somewhere in there.
But yeah, as far as that information, it's at the normal location of Little Jules Learning Center, which is on Evergreen Boulevard. There will be more information in the meeting notes and updates in the email to come probably before the end of this week.
Yep. So we're holding it at Little Jules. We're going for a neutral space. I believe it starts at 6:30 and runs for about 2 hours with dinner, conversation, a video, small group time. After people have kind of a get to know you the first couple weeks, when people kind of feel a little bit more comfortable, we're going to offer talking with people who are more expert in recovery issues, if they want to talk or have conversations. So just kind of helping people if they want a different pathway to wellness. So
we're very excited to start that here in the next month.
Yeah. If you guys were at the Christmas party for the ROSC, Matthias Pope is he's our MC, he's our face for Alpha, and he's bouncing off the walls.
Very excited about it. Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. Were there any other updates?
I happen to be aware that JOLT, which is the harm reduction organization out of Peoria, actually just hired a Bloomington outreach person. We happen
I'm so excited on that. I'm sorry. I'm
no, you're good. It is exciting. A couple of people in the youth program happen to also have kind of started a kind of volunteer plus relationship with JOLT, and so we'll be meeting with them next week. But we'll be excited to have some more formal harm reduction resources.
Okay, Marita, let me connect with you on that outside of this meeting, because that's something I would be interested in connecting on.
Today.
And then do we have any other updates? All right, if not, going to go ahead and cover what we're going to be doing in our next meeting and letting y'all know when that is. So our next meeting is going to be April 18th, same time, the third Tuesday of the month. If you would like to, we would love to have you in person. We haven't had much with that, but we would very much love to have people in person for that. We're going to have some guest speakers because we're going to be highlighting National Fair Housing Month, National Financial Literacy Month, along with National Reentry Month. So we will have Thrive Housing, which is a nonprofit for helping to bring affordable housing to McLean County. Matthias Pope, he's been a wonderful community partner. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about just basic financial planning and financial literacy for people who, for those of us who have, that's not something we learned in high school. And then we're also partnering with the Reentry Council. They're going to come talk about the work they do and also the services they offer and resources they've got. And then if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or, you know, you want to set up a meeting to talk with me or Barb about just some of what we've been doing, this is our contact info. Like I said, feel free to reach out anytime. And then I think that concludes our meeting, and I'm going to give y'all about 5 to 10 minutes back of your time. So thanks everyone for coming out.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you, and thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Hannah. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.